The bullet tore through Cole Harrington's shoulder the moment he stepped between the gun and the woman who'd saved his life. Blood bloomed across his white dress shirt in a dark spreading flower, while the woman he'd planned to marry, Claudia Wren, socialite philanthropist, the love he thought he knew, stood 10 feet away with her fingers still on the trigger. Behind her, servers loaded with stolen billions blinked in the darkness of an abandoned Red Hook ironworks, while armed men closed in from every shadow. Maya Reeves, the broke waitress who'd risked everything on a handwritten warning, now held the only key that could cut the power and stop the theft. But first she had to survive the next 60 seconds. If you're hooked, stay until the end to see how a paper napkin note ignites a war between Manhattan's elite. Drop a like and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The champagne was crystal. The oysters were Kumamoto. And the lies were perfect. Maya Reeves balanced the silver tray against her hip and wove through the forest of tailored suits and couture gowns crowding the private dining room at Criterion Manhattan's most exclusive members-only restaurant. Her feet screamed inside discount ballet flats that had logged 11 hours already. Her lower back throbbed from carrying trays heavier than her monthly rent, and the corner of her apron was still damp from where she'd scrubbed red wine off the marble floor after some private equity partner knocked over his second glass without even looking up. But she smiled. She always smiled. That was the job. "Excuse me." Maya slipped past a woman drowning in diamonds, delivered 2 glasses of Sancerre to a corner booth, and made herself invisible again. Invisible was good. Invisible meant tips. Invisible meant she might actually make rent this month, assuming the power company didn't follow through on their third notice. She caught her reflection in one of the gilt-framed mirrors lining the east wall. Dark hair pulled into a ruthless bun. Pale skin that hadn't seen real sunlight in months. Shadows under her eyes that no amount of concealer could disguise. 29 years old, and she looked 40. That was what working doubles did. That was what grief did when you let it follow you everywhere. 3 years ago, she'd been halfway through Columbia Law, top 12% of her class. A summer associate position lined up at a white shoe firm on Park Avenue, a father who called every Sunday to tell her she was going to change the world. Then her father got sick. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the kind that moved fast and didn't care about dreams or tuition payments or anything except devouring everything in its path. She dropped out in October, burned through her savings by January. Worked 3 jobs through the following spring and watched him fade anyway. Held his hand on a Tuesday morning in November, while the machines went quiet and the room went still, and then walked out of that hospital into a city that had forgotten she existed. Now she was here, in a room that cost more to reserve for one evening than she would earn in 6 months serving people who had never once looked at her face. Maya. The floor manager materialized at her elbow, his voice low and urgent. Javier, a compact man with nervous hands and a talent for appearing exactly when you least wanted him. VIP room. They need another magnum of the Krug. The good Krug. And don't screw it up. This is Cole Harrington's table. Maya's stomach tightened. She knew the name. Everyone in the city knew the name. Cole Harrington, founder and CEO of Harrington Vantage, a software empire that had reshaped cloud security and artificial intelligence from a company he'd started in a Brooklyn apartment at 24. 34 years old now, net worth estimated somewhere north of $14 billion, the kind of man who moved markets with a single public statement and sent competitors into emergency board meetings with a single tweet. And tonight, he was celebrating. She grabbed the Magnum from the wine vault. $2,200 a bottle, more than her car payment and electric bill combined. She carried it carefully through the restaurant, past the sommelier station, past the service corridor toward the VIP suite at the back of the building. The door was frosted glass, etched with Criterion's crest, flanked by 2 men in dark suits, whose necks were wider than Maya's waist. One of them scanned her face, nodded, and pushed the door open. The room was smaller than she'd expected, intimate. A single round table beneath a low crystal chandelier surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Manhattan skyline like a living oil painting. The Empire State glowing amber the Hudson, a dark ribbon far to the west. 6 people sat around the table, but Maya's gaze went immediately to the man at the center, because his presence filled the room the way weather fills a valley. Cole Harrington was taller than his magazine photographs suggested. 6'2" easily, with the broad-shouldered build of someone who still found time for the gym despite running a $14 billion company. Dark hair perfectly cut, a jaw that could have been sculpted, eyes the color of slate, quick assessing, missing nothing. He wore a charcoal suit tailored so precisely it looked like architecture rather than clothing. But it was his smile that surprised her. Warm, genuine. The kind of smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and made him look younger than his age, almost boyish in its openness. He was directing that smile at the woman beside him, Claudia Wren. Maya had seen her face in Vogue and Vanity Fair and every society column in the city. Claudia was beautiful in the way that seemed engineered platinum blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon porcelain skin cheekbones that could cut glass, a posture so perfect it looked like a conscious choice. She wore a champagne-colored gown that caught the light when she moved, and on her left hand a diamond ring the size of a small planet caught the candlelight and scattered it across the walls like a disco ball. Tonight was their engagement party. Ah, perfect timing. Cole's voice was rich and warm, textured in a way that made you want to listen, even when he was saying nothing important. He gestured toward the magnum. We were just about to toast. Maya approached the table, hyper-aware of every step, every breath. She positioned the magnum in the silver ice bucket and began the careful process of opening it. The deliberate twist, the controlled release, the muffled sigh of the cork, rather than a vulgar pop. Criterion had standards. To new beginnings, said one of the other guests, a silver-haired man in a navy suit. To partnership, said a woman in emerald silk, raising her glass. Cole raised his flute toward Claudia. For saying yes. Claudia smiled. It was a pageant smile, polished and bright, designed for photographs and rooms full of people watching. To us, she murmured. Maya poured moving clockwise around the table. She'd learned to make herself part of the furniture during moments like this, present but not intrusive, efficient but not rushed, invisible in the way only people who have practiced invisibility can be. She was filling the fourth glass when she noticed it. Claudia's hand resting on the white linen tablecloth was trembling. Not much, just a slight, barely visible quiver in the fingers. Nothing anyone else in the room would have caught. But Maya had spent 2 years caring for a dying man, learning to read every micro-expression, every tiny signal the body gives when something is wrong. She'd learned what hands looked like when they were afraid. Claudia Wren was afraid, or angry, or both. Maya's gaze flicked up. Claudia was still smiling, still playing the radiant bride-to-be with absolute precision, but her eyes kept moving, darting toward the door, toward the windows, toward her phone, which sat face down on the table beside her champagne flute, waiting for something. Maya finished pouring and stepped back. Will there be anything else, Sir? Cole glanced up. For a moment their eyes met, and Maya felt the full weight of his attention land on her intense searching, uncomfortably direct, the kind of look that made you feel genuinely seen rather than simply observed. Then he smiled. No, thank you. You've been excellent tonight. He reached into his jacket, produced a money clip, and peeled off $200 bills. He held them out. For your trouble. Maya's throat tightened. $200. That was groceries for 2.5 weeks. A dent in her overdue electric bill. Thank you, sir. She kept her voice steady. Enjoy your evening. She turned to leave. That was when she heard it. A voice low and urgent coming from just outside the VIP room door from the narrow service corridor that ran alongside it where servers moved between the kitchen and the private suites. Male voice. Clipped. Precise. Like someone accustomed to giving orders in small spaces. Transfer codes are on his phone. We move at 11:15. Make sure he doesn't leave the building before then. Maya froze. She was 3 feet from the door, half hidden by a decorative silk screen panel near the entrance. If she moved, they'd see her through the frosted glass. If she stayed, they might open the door. She held her breath. A second voice answered, softer, female, and unmistakable because Maya had just been listening to it say to us in a candlelit room. Claudia, I'll keep him here. Just make sure your people are in position. I don't want any mistakes. What about the staff? The male voice asked. Claudia's reply came without hesitation. Collateral damage. Her tone was ice. No witnesses. Maya's blood turned to frost. She didn't think. She slipped through the door and into the main hallway, head down tray clutched against her chest like a shield. Her heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the empty magnum. Behind her she heard Claudia's laugh. Bright false, the sound of a woman playing a role so practiced, she'd forgotten where the performance ended and the person began. Maya made it back to the main dining room and ducked into the service corridor, pressing her back against the cool plaster wall. Her mind was racing fragments of conversation, looping transfer codes 11 to 15. No witnesses. This wasn't a robbery. This was a setup. A hit. And Cole Harrington had no idea. She glanced at the clock mounted above the kitchen pass-through. 10:58 p.m. 17 minutes. She pressed both palms flat against the wall and forced herself to breathe. She should call the police. But what would she say? She'd overheard a conversation. She had no proof, no recorded audio, no names beyond Claudia's, and Claudia Wren was a philanthropist, a socialite, a woman whose family had been Manhattan royalty for 2 generations. Her foundation provided literacy programs to 50,000 children across the 5 boroughs. Her face was on the gala circuit year-round. Nobody was going to believe a waitress with an overdue electric bill and a dropped-out law degree. But if she did nothing, if she walked back to the locker room, clocked out, rode the subway home, Cole Harrington was going to die. Maybe everyone in that room was going to die. No witnesses. Those words kept looping cold and absolute. Her hands were still shaking. She looked down and saw the pen she always kept in her apron pocket, a cheap ballpoint, the kind they gave away free at banks. She looked at the cocktail napkins stacked on the service shelf beside her. An idea formed. Desperate. Reckless. Probably suicidal. But it was all she had. She grabbed a napkin, uncapped the pen, and wrote 5 words in cramped, urgent handwriting, folded it into a tight square, tucked it into her palm. Then she walked back into the lion's den. The VIP room was louder now. The champagne had done its work. Cole was standing his jacket off, tie loosened, telling some story that had the table in stitches. He was gesturing with his hands animated alive, his whole body turned toward the room with the easy charisma of someone who genuinely enjoyed the people around him. Claudia sat beside him, her smile fixed and radiant, her eyes on her phone under the table where she thought no one could see. Maya approached with a water pitcher. Refills. Several hands raised. Thank you. Yes, she moved around the table, pouring. Cole turned toward her mid-sentence, and that was when she moved, stepped forward too quickly, deliberately, and stumbled. The pitcher tilted. Water splashed across the linen across Cole's side of the table. He jerked back. Maya gasped, reaching out to steady herself, and as she did, her hand brushed his. The folded napkin passed from her palm into his fingers. Oh, God, I'm so sorry. She grabbed a towel from her apron, dabbing frantically at the table. I'm so sorry, sir. It's fine. Cole's voice was calm, unhurried. His fingers had closed around the napkin. Really no harm done. For a fraction of a second, their eyes met. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She held his gaze for that one heartbeat and let him see what was in her face. Not apology, not embarrassment, but urgency. Then she stepped back, bowed her head, and retreated. Behind her, she heard Claudia's voice, sharp and low. What was that about? Nothing. Cole's tone was easy, dismissive. Just an accident. But as Maya reached the doorway and glanced back, a single quick look over her shoulder, she saw Cole Harrington standing perfectly still in the middle of the room, and the napkin was already gone. She made it halfway down the service corridor before her knees buckled. She braced herself against the wall, gasping. Adrenaline was crashing through her system like a freight train derailing in slow motion. She'd done it. She'd delivered the warning. Now she just had to hope he believed her. 10:58 became 11:03. 12 minutes left. She forced herself upright and moved toward the staff lockers at the back of the building. If this went wrong, if Cole ignored the note, if Claudia realized what had happened, Maya needed to be gone. She was pulling off her apron when the lights went out. Not flickering, not dimming. Out the entire restaurant plunged into absolute darkness in an instant, and for 3 full seconds there was perfect, eerie silence. Then the screaming started. Maya's first thought was fire. But there was no smoke, no alarm, no smell of anything burning, just darkness and the rising tide of panic from the dining room. She grabbed her phone, turned on the flashlight, and pushed through the service door into the main hall. Chaos. People on their feet shouting, crowding toward the exits. Silverware crashed to the floor. Glass shattered somewhere in the dark. A woman was crying high and breathless somewhere near the bar. And then cutting through all of it, slicing through the noise like a blade through silk, the sound of the front door slamming open. Footsteps. Heavy, coordinated. Multiple pairs moving with the rhythm of people who had practiced this. Maya's blood turned to ice. She knew that sound. She'd heard it in 100 movies and never thought she'd hear it in real life. Boots, tactical boots, moving fast and together. She flattened herself against the wall as 3 men stormed through the entrance into the dining room. They wore black tactical gear faces masked by balaclavas, and they carried weapons, compact submachine guns that looked like they'd been pulled from a military armory. One of them fired a burst into the ceiling without breaking stride. Plaster rained down and the screaming doubled. Everybody on the floor. Now. The diners dropped. Some dove under tables. Others pressed themselves to the marble hands behind their heads, the way you see in videos and always think you would handle differently if it were you. Maya scanned the room. She needed to get to the VIP suite. She needed to know if Cole had read the note. Into the radio, one of the gunmen said, "Main floor secure. Moving to secondary target. Secondary target, the VIP room." Maya ran. She sprinted down the service corridor, past the wine vault, past the kitchen entrance, heart hammering so hard she could feel the vibration in her throat. Behind her, she could hear boots pounding on the marble of the main hall. She hit the VIP room door and shoved it open. Empty. The table was abandoned, chairs overturned, champagne spilled across the white linen like a wound. The crystal chandelier swayed gently from some disturbance in the air, throwing light across an empty room. No Cole. No Claudia. No bodies. Maya exhaled. Then a hand closed over her mouth from behind and she went rigid with terror. "Don't move," a voice said directly in her ear. Low, male, controlled. "Don't make a sound." She froze. The hand released her. She spun around. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, mid-40s, silver at his temples, with the kind of face that had absorbed too many hard years without flinching. Dark suit, earpiece, eyes the color of cold water, professional assessing giving nothing away. "You're the waitress," he said. It wasn't a question. Maya nodded mute. Leon Drake, head of Mr. Harrington's security detail. He glanced past her toward the corridor. "You gave him the note." "Yes. I heard them. I heard her. I heard Claudia. I know." His expression didn't shift. "Mr. Harrington is already moving. We're extracting him through the kitchen. You need to come with us." "What?" "No. I need to. You're a witness, which means you're a target." He took her arm firm but not rough, and pulled her toward the back of the VIP room where a narrow service door she hadn't noticed stood slightly ajar. "Move. Now." They moved through a narrow back hallway and into the kitchen. Pandemonium sous chefs crouched behind the stainless steel prep counters, a line cook wedged into the corner beside the walk-in freezer pots scattered across the floor where someone had knocked them in the dark. And there, in the center of it all, was Cole Harrington. He'd shed his jacket. His shirt was open at the collar sleeves rolled to the elbow, and his face wore an expression Maya had never seen on any magazine cover fury, cold and absolutely controlled. Beside him stood another man in a dark suit, speaking rapidly into a phone, his voice too low to catch. Cole's gaze snapped to Maya the moment she came through the door. Something moved behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or something faster and harder than that. Her, he asked Leon. "She's the one who warned you." Cole stepped forward. Up close, he was even more imposing than he'd seemed across the dining room table. Not physically threatening, but dense with presence, like the air around him had different properties. "You heard them," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Maya's voice came out barely above a whisper. Claudia was talking to someone just outside the door. They mentioned transfer codes, your phone. 11:15. And then she said, Her throat closed. She forced it open. No witnesses. Cole's jaw tightened. A muscle jumped in his cheek. Where is she now? I don't know. She was in the room with you when I... A burst of gunfire erupted somewhere deeper in the restaurant, close enough to rattle the kitchen's ventilation ducts. Leon swore under his breath. We move. Service exit. Now. He led them through the kitchen, past the industrial ovens and the steel prep tables to a heavy metal door at the back, marked emergency exit, do not prop open. He kicked it, and the door swung wide. Cold night air hit Maya's face like a slap. They were in a narrow service alley, dark and close, lined with dumpsters and stacked wooden pallets. A black SUV idled at the far end, exhaust drifting white in the February cold. 30 feet away. Maybe less. Go, Leon said. Cole moved first. His hand closed around Maya's wrist and he pulled her forward and she stumbled. Her cheap ballet flat skidded on the wet asphalt, but he didn't let go. They were 10 feet from the SUV when the emergency door behind them exploded outward. 3 men spilled into the alley, weapons raised. Leon spun. His own weapon was already in his hand. She hadn't even seen him draw it, and he opened fire. The detonation was enormous in the narrow alley muzzle flashes strobing against the brick walls. Get in, he roared. Cole shoved Maya at the rear door of the SUV. She hit it hard, yanked it open, dove inside. Cole followed, slamming it behind him. The driver, a woman with close-cropped dark hair and eyes like chips of flint, didn't wait for a signal. She floored the accelerator. The SUV rocketed forward, tires screaming against the wet pavement, and Maya was thrown hard against the seat. Gunfire cracked. The rear window shattered. Safety glass sprayed across the interior in a glittering cascade, and Maya screamed a short, shocked sound before Cole pulled her down, covering her with his body, pressing her flat against the seat as 2 more rounds punched through the rear frame with sounds like steel hammers striking tin. The SUV swerved hard tires, shrieking as the driver cut across 2 lanes of traffic. Maya's head cracked against the door, and stars detonated behind her eyes. Then they were out, accelerating hard down a side street, the restaurant falling away behind them, the city opening up around them in the blur of headlights and signage, and the ordinary, oblivious flow of a Thursday night in Manhattan. Maya lay there for a moment with Cole Harrington's weight across her back, both of them breathing hard, the glass-strewn seat pressing into her cheek, her ears ringing from the gunfire. Then Cole pushed himself up and looked down at her with an expression that had shed everything except pure, focused concern. Are you hit? She checked. Arms, legs. The burning sensation along her temple turned out to be a graze from a shard of glass, not a bullet. I don't think so. No. I'm okay. He pulled back. His hands moved quickly across her arms, her shoulders not intimately, but medically checking. Then he turned to the driver. Status. The woman's voice came back clipped and professional, Leon still inside the building. He's covering the extraction route. We've got to tail 2 vehicles, maybe 3. They picked us up as soon as we hit the street. Cole's jaw tightened. He looked out through the shattered rear window. Maya followed his gaze, 2 sets of headlights running close together, closing distance through the traffic behind them. Black sedans, moving with purpose. Who are these people? She whispered. Cole's expression was granite. People who just made the worst mistake of their careers. The SUV tore through the grid of Manhattan streets, running lights, cutting across lanes, the driver handling the vehicle with a precision that spoke of serious training. Maya braced herself in the seat, her pulse a jackhammer against her ribs, her mind struggling to assemble coherent thought out of the fragments of the last 20 minutes. An hour ago, she'd been worried about whether she could cover the laundromat this week. Now she was in a bulletproof SUV with a shattered rear window, fleeing armed men through a city that had no idea any of this was happening. One of the sedans tried to cut left to flank them. A garbage truck pulling out from a side street caught it square in the intersection. The sedan braked hard, skidding blocked. That's one, the driver said. The other 2 are hanging back, Cole said, watching. They don't want to engage on an open street with civilian witnesses. Smart. Keep moving. Where are we going? Maya managed. Safe house. Cole had his phone out now, typing. Upstate. Off any map. What about the police? Shouldn't we? The police are 30 seconds behind whoever planned this, Cole said. His voice was flat, certain, carrying the weight of experience. His eyes stayed on the road, on the mirrors, on everything at once. Right now, we're on our own. Maya pressed back against the seat as the driver cut hard down a side street, and for a moment she caught a glimpse of her own reflection in the dark glass of the window. Pale, disheveled, still wearing her Criterion uniform, with the apron half unclipped from her waist, and tried to understand how she had gotten from pouring Krug at an engagement party to this. Then Cole looked at her and she realized he was seeing the same confusion. "Who are you?" he asked. He wasn't being cold, he was being direct. There was a difference. "My name is Maya Reeves. I'm a waitress. I was working the floor tonight, and I overheard them talking in the corridor outside your room. You could have walked away," he said. "Most people would have." "I know. Why didn't you?" She thought about it. The honest answer was that she didn't fully know yet that something in her had moved before her brain had signed off on the decision, some reflex older than fear or self-preservation. But she also knew something else. "Because you looked at me," she said. "In the room when you took your tip, you actually looked at me. Not through me. There were 50 people in that restaurant who never saw my face tonight, and you looked at me in 5 seconds like I was a person." She paused. "When I handed you that note and you believed it, that meant something." Cole held her gaze for a beat. Something shifted behind his eyes. Then he turned back to the city, sliding past the windows. "Let's hope I can return the favor," he said quietly, "and get you out of this alive." The drive upstate took nearly 2 hours. The city gave way to suburbs, to exurbs, to the kind of darkness you only find when you're genuinely far from human habitation. Maya sat in silence for most of it, the adrenaline fading into exhaustion, her hands gradually stopping their shaking. Somewhere around the 40-minute mark, Cole's phone buzzed, and he had a quiet, terse conversation with someone named Leon, who was apparently alive and had gotten out of Criterion through a basement maintenance exit. Something Maya found she was genuinely, disproportionately relieved to know. The safe house appeared out of the trees at the end of a private road that didn't appear on any mapping application Maya had checked out of some compulsive need for orientation. It looked like a high-end vacation cabin from the outside. Inside it was something else entirely, steel-reinforced walls, windows of ballistic glass cameras covering every approach angle, a server rack in the back room humming with monitoring software. A fortress that had been designed to look like a place where you'd hang bird feeders on the porch. The driver, who introduced herself as Nadia Voss, former Marine current head of Cole's tactical security team, swept the building with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this before in environments considerably more dangerous. She called clear. Cole disappeared into the back room immediately, phone already to his ear. Maya sat down on a leather couch and put her hands on her knees and stared at the middle distance. Nadia appeared from the kitchen with a glass of water. "Drink." Maya drank. It helped a little. "You did well tonight," Nadia said. Her voice was surprisingly quiet, not gentle exactly, but considered. "Most people freeze. You moved." I panicked and scribbled on a napkin. Nadia's expression didn't change, but something in it softened fractionally. "That's not freezing. That's improvising. There's a difference." From the back room, Cole's voice floated through in pieces offshore routing audit trail. He was already fighting back. Maya closed her eyes. She thought about her apartment. The stack of bills on the kitchen counter held down by an empty coffee mug. The car with its failing transmission she'd been putting off fixing for 3 months. The Columbia Law textbook still on her shelf that she hadn't been able to bring herself to sell, some stubborn part of her refusing to close that door entirely, even while the rest of her had already accepted it was sealed. 24 hours ago, her biggest crisis had been whether she could cover the dry cleaning bill on her uniform before her next shift. Now she was a material witness to corporate conspiracy, an attempted murder sitting in a bulletproof safe house in the Hudson Valley, while armed men somewhere in the city regrouped and planned their next move. No witnesses. The words came back cold and precise. Collateral damage. They were already coming for her. She understood that. The door to the back room opened and Cole emerged. He changed into dark jeans and a black sweater, his hair slightly disheveled, his face drawn. He looked human, tired, angry in a way that had gone very quiet. He sat down across from Maya and leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. "Tell me everything. From the beginning, every word you heard." She walked him through it. The corridor outside the VIP room, The male voice clipped precise, the voice of someone accustomed to operational planning. Claudia's voice answering, and the thing that had struck Maya first wasn't even the words, but the absence of hesitation. No witnesses. Not a question. Not an if necessary. Just a statement of fact. Cole listened without interrupting. His expression was unreadable throughout, which Maya suspected took considerable effort given what he was hearing. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You mentioned something, he said finally. A word Claudia used. She said something about a place. Maya frowned, reaching back. She said she told the man on the phone to make sure the foundry was ready. Cole went very still. What does that mean? Maya asked. What's the foundry? He was quiet for a moment longer, like he was deciding how much to share. Then, there's an old ironworks in Red Hook, industrial waterfront, abandoned since the 90s. 6 months ago, one of my analysts flagged an unusual property acquisition through a shell company in Delaware, a company that didn't exist 18 months ago. She traced it back to Ashford Partners. Victor Ashford. The name landed in Maya's chest like a stone dropping into still water. She'd seen it in Cole's expression when he'd said it, and she knew, even before she asked, that this was the center of gravity for everything that had happened tonight. He's been trying to destroy me for years, Cole said. Quietly. Steadily. The kind of quiet that comes after a long, simmering anger has finally found its target. Every dirty play in the corporate book, poaching my engineers, manufacturing regulatory complaints, undercutting our contracts, flooding the market with misleading data about our security vulnerabilities. He's lost every round, and 48 hours ago I closed a deal that's going to cost him his biggest client and $3 billion in projected revenue. The Kellerman merger, Maya said. She'd read about it. Harrington Vantage acquiring Kellerman Industries. It had been the business story of the quarter. Goes live in 48 hours. Cole's smile was blade thin. Once it does, Ashford Partners hemorrhages their anchor account and has 18 months before the firm becomes insolvent. Victor knows it. He's been watching it come for 6 weeks, so he decided to stop it by killing you and stealing your accounts. And using Claudia to do it. Cole's voice, for the first time since they'd left Criterion, carried something that wasn't controlled. The edges of it were raw, which means she's been part of this for months, maybe longer. He paused. 18 months. He said it like he was testing the number, turning it over, trying to find the place where it didn't mean what it meant. I met her at a charity gala. She was running a literacy foundation. She was exactly what she appeared to be. Or she was very good at being exactly what you needed to see, Maya said. He looked at her. Maybe both. He stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the darkness and the tree line. But the foundry, if they're routing the transfers through a black site server installation there, and if Victor is running the operation personally, then that's where the evidence is. The financial trail. The authentication records. Everything that proves this was coordinated. Can we go to the police with what we have? What we have is your word and a note on a cocktail napkin. Cole turned from the window. We need the servers. We need proof that we'll survive a legal challenge. Victor's lawyers are among the best in the country. He'll have 3 different explanations ready for everything we can produce unless we can show the origin point. The foundry. Going there would be suicide, probably. Cole agreed. He'd have it secured. Armed personnel. We don't have the manpower to... You have me. Cole and Nadia both turned. Maya stood up. Her legs were unsteady, and she was aware of it, but her voice came out even. I grew up in Red Hook. My father worked construction on the waterfront for 22 years. I know that neighborhood the way other people know their own apartments. I know the streets, the back lots, the utility corridors under the old warehouse district. She met Cole's gaze. There are maintenance tunnels under those blocks that the city sealed off in 2012 when they converted part of the waterfront for the park. Most of them are still passable. If you need to get inside that building without being seen through the main approaches, I can show you how. The silence that followed was particular in quality, the kind of silence that forms when people are recalculating. You don't have to do this, Cole said. You've already done more than anyone could have asked. They said no witnesses. Maya kept her voice level. That means they're already planning to come for me. So yes, I do have to do this. The only way I'm safe is if you're safe. And the only way you're safe is if we get the evidence that puts Victor Ashford somewhere he can't reach either of us. Another silence. Then Cole smiled. It was small, grim, and dangerous, entirely unlike the warm smile he'd worn across the engagement dinner table, and somehow more honest. "All right," he said. "Then we go to war." The garage behind the safe house had been converted into an operations center. Monitors displaying financial data streams, satellite imagery, security feeds from 36 cameras around the property, and what looked like live market data from 4 different exchanges. By the time Cole explained the setup to Maya, 2 more members of his security team had arrived from the city Eli Park, a wiry tech specialist in his early 30s with quick, nervous hands and the kind of eyes that were always doing 3 calculations simultaneously, and Theo Marsh, a former NYPD detective, built like a load-bearing wall, who walked into the room, took in the situation in approximately 8 seconds, and said, "Only, when do we move?" Leon was still in Manhattan coordinating with Cole's legal team and running interference with law enforcement while the lawyers scrambled to file emergency injunctions on Cole's financial accounts. They were fighting 2 clocks simultaneously. The clock of the transfer, which Eli confirmed was already being probed from offshore IPs, and the clock of Slater's media operation, which would shift into gear the moment dawn broke over the city. "All right," Cole said, standing at the center of the room with the satellite image of Red Hook's industrial waterfront displayed on the largest monitor. "Listen up. We have 2 objectives. 1, stop the transfer before it completes. 2, obtain proof that Ashford and Claudia orchestrated tonight. Evidence that survives a courtroom." "Eli, what's the status on the authentication breach?" Eli didn't look up from his keyboard. "They've been probing for 40 minutes. Your 2-factor is holding, but it's going to give eventually. They have your physical phone they're running spoofing protocols against the biometric backup." He grimaced. 3 hours. Maybe less. Cole's jaw tightened. They'd gotten his phone at the restaurant. During the toast, the celebration, the distraction of Claudia's performance, and his own blind trust. "Then we move now." Cole turned to the satellite image. "Maya, talk to me. What's the fastest way in? She stepped forward, studied the overhead image of the ironworks, a sprawling complex of brick buildings and rusted metal frameworks surrounded by chain-link fencing and overgrown lots. "There." She pointed to the eastern edge of the property, where the satellite image showed a concrete embankment running parallel to a drainage corridor. "That's the old canal access. My dad's crew used those tunnels during the 2014 waterfront renovation. They're supposed to be sealed, but the grading on the eastern intake corrodes every winter. Someone patches it every spring, but it's February." How wide 2 people side by side. They connect to the loading dock basement on the ironworks east wing. Nadia leaned in over her shoulder, studying the image. "Security on the tunnel approach. 20 years ago, none." Maya shook her head. "Now I don't know. But if they're focused on running an illegal server installation, their security posture is probably oriented toward the main approaches. A forgotten maintenance tunnel from the canal isn't going to be their priority." Or Theo said, his voice dry, "They've got motion sensors and cameras wired through the whole subsurface level." "Only one way to find out," Cole said. Nadia straightened. "Sir, with due respect, this is insane. We don't have schematics, we don't have intel on hostile strength, and we're proposing to conduct an uncoordinated entry against an unknown number of armed professionals on their own ground. The smart play is to bring in law enforcement now. NYPD, FBI, financial crimes, let them—" "Which takes time we don't have," Cole interrupted. "The moment we formally involve law enforcement, Victor's lawyers file emergency motions. He moves the operation, wipes the servers, and disappears the evidence before any warrant clears." He paused. "We do this quietly. We do this tonight." Nadia held his gaze for a long moment. "Then your funeral boss?" "Let's hope not." Cole turned back to the monitors and began issuing assignments with the efficiency of someone who had made difficult decisions under time pressure many times before. Eli would remain at the safe house, monitoring the authentication breach and attempting to locate Cole's phone's physical position via the device's encrypted backup signal. Theo and Nadia would handle perimeter security and overwatch from outside the foundry. Cole and Maya would go in through the tunnel. "And you stay behind me," Cole told her. The moment I say run, you run. No arguments. Define run. He almost smiled despite himself. Move away from gunfire at maximum speed. Deal, deal. 20 minutes later, they were in two vehicles. A nondescript panel van with Theo at the wheel and Nadia riding shotgun, and a dark gray sedan Cole driving Maya in the passenger seat, the safe house falling away behind them as they headed back toward the glow of the city. Maya watched the dark trees sliding past the window. Her hands were steadier now. Her breathing had found its rhythm. She'd crossed some line back at Criterion. She didn't know exactly when or how, but she knew the crossing was permanent and she was done fighting it. "You okay?" Cole asked. His voice had gone quieter, more private. "No," she said, "but I will be." He glanced at her sideways. "For what it's worth, thank you. For the note. For all of it. Don't thank me yet." "Fair point." A brief ghost of a smile. "Then, tell me about your father. You said he worked the waterfront, 22 years. He started as a laborer when he was 19 and worked his way up to site supervisor. He knew every tunnel and access corridor on that stretch of the Red Hook waterfront from the canal all the way up to the ferry terminal." She paused. "He used to take me on the job site sometimes when I was little. He'd show me the underground systems, the old drainage tunnels, the utility corridors. He called them the city's veins. He sounds like someone who paid attention. He paid attention to everything." She looked at the dark road ahead. "He was the one who told me to go to law school, said I had the kind of mind that needed something real to fight for." Cole was quiet for a moment. What happened to him? She told him. Not all of it. Not the drawn-out months, not the particular texture of watching someone you love disappear by degrees. But enough. The diagnosis, the decision, the years afterward working to stay afloat in a city that had stopped caring whether she did. "You could have rebuilt," Cole said. "Law school again. Eventually. Maybe. But rebuilding takes money, and money takes time, and time keeps moving whether you're rebuilding or not." She shrugged. 3 years felt like forever when I was in it." Cole's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. "I should tell you something. About Claudia. About why tonight is complicated. You don't have to." "I know." He was quiet for a moment, watching the road. "I knew her for a year and a half. 18 months. I thought she was—" He stopped, started again. "I thought I knew what kind of person she was. The work she did. The way she talked about the communities her foundation served. The way she seemed to genuinely care about things most people in our social circle have learned not to mention in polite company." He paused again. "Turns out she was just very good at being what I needed to see. Or maybe she was both things at once," Maya said. "Maybe the care was real, and the betrayal was real, and people are complicated enough to contain both." Cole considered that. "Is that supposed to be comforting?" "I don't know." "Is it—" He looked at her for a fraction of a second, then back at the road. "Somewhat," he said. "Surprisingly." Red Hook materialized around them, the industrial waterfront at 2 in the morning, all shuttered warehouses and empty lots and streets where the asphalt had cracked and heaved through a decade of freeze-thaw cycles nobody had bothered to repair. Maya felt the neighborhood in her chest before she recognized specific landmarks, the particular quality of the air off the harbor, the smell of salt and diesel and old wood, the way the streets ran at angles that didn't quite conform to the grid. "There," she said, pointing. "That alley, between the brick buildings. The canal access is at the end." Cole pulled over and killed the engine. The van with Theo and Nadia parked a block back, maintaining overwatch distance. They climbed out into the cold. Maya's breath misted in front of her face. The city sounds were distant here, a siren somewhere to the north, the thrum of a cargo ship on the harbor. The alley was dark and close, smelling of standing water and rust. The fence at the end was exactly where she remembered. Chain link old enough that the galvanization had turned the color of old bone sagging on its posts. Cole produced bolt cutters from the bag he'd brought from the safe house and made quick work of the padlock. The gate swung open with a groan that sounded enormous in the stillness. Beyond it, concrete steps descended into darkness. Maya activated the flashlight on her phone. Cole did the same. She went down first. The tunnel smelled of damp earth and old metal, and something else, the specific cold mineral smell of water that has been moving underground for decades. The walls were slick with condensation. The ceiling was low enough that Cole had to tuck his chin slightly. Their footsteps echoed in the confined space, each sound magnified and thrown back at them from the curved concrete walls. How far Cole's voice was low? 200 yards, maybe a bit less. It opens into the old loading dock basement on the east wing. They moved in silence after that. Maya kept the light low sweeping just ahead of her feet. Her nerves were stretched wire tight. Every shadow a potential presence, every drip of water in the darkness, the sound of something she couldn't identify. Halfway through, Cole's phone vibrated. He checked it, his face lit from below by the screen. "Eli," he murmured. "He's got a location on my phone. It's inside the foundry, second floor, east wing." "That's where the old offices were," Maya whispered. "Climate controlled for the manufacturing records. If they're running servers, that's where they'd put them." Cole nodded. "That's where we're going." They reached the end of the tunnel. A rusted metal grate blocked the exit, but just as Maya had promised, the lower right corner had corroded through, leaving a gap 18 inches square enough to squeeze through sideways. Cole went first, moving through with surprising ease. Maya followed, her tactical vest catching briefly on the jagged metal before she pulled free, and then she was through, standing in darkness, and they were inside. The loading dock was cavernous, the ceiling 30 feet above the space stripped of everything except the ghost shapes of old machinery in the shadows. Moonlight fell through broken skylights in long, silver columns, illuminating the edges of things without revealing their centers. The air smelled of rust and old oil and something else, something electrical and new that didn't belong to a building this abandoned. Nadia's voice crackled in Cole's earpiece, just audible to Maya. "We've got eyes on the perimeter. 2 guards at the main entrance, 1 on the roof. No movement on your approach." Copy, Cole subvocalized. "We're inside." Moving to the east wing. They crossed the factory floor like shadows, keeping to the darkness between the moonlit columns, moving around the rusted husks of old machinery. Maya's heart was enormous in her chest. Every step felt like a decision. The east wing staircase was a metal structure bolted to the interior wall, the kind of industrial staircase designed for function rather than aesthetics. Cole tested the first step. It groaned, but held. He started climbing. Maya followed. At the top, a narrow corridor ran the length of the building, lined with closed office doors. Most were missing their original doors, hanging open onto darkness. At the far end, one door was closed, and beneath it, a thin line of white-blue light. Cole drew his weapon, a compact sidearm that looked utterly incongruous in the hand of a tech CEO, until you remembered that this particular tech CEO had spent the last 2 hours moving through a crisis with the calm of someone who had encountered danger before and had made arrangements. He approached the door, listened, tested the handle, unlocked. He eased it open, and they stepped inside. The room was a collision of decades. Old filing cabinets shoved against the walls, water-damaged acoustic tiles on the ceiling, a floor that had once been industrial linoleum but was now mostly bare concrete where the tiles had peeled away. And in the center, looking like it had been teleported from a data center in a different century, a state-of-the-art server installation, 4 racks of black equipment screens displaying cascading data streams, cables running in organized complexity between the components. Seated at the main terminal, his back to the door, his fingers moving across a keyboard with the absorbed focus of someone deep in complex work, was a man Maya didn't recognize. Mid-30s, thin, the particular pallor of someone whose profession kept them indoors. He didn't hear them come in. Cole crossed the room in 3 long strides and pressed the muzzle of his gun to the back of the man's head. "Don't move," Cole said. "Don't speak. Hands where I can see them." The man froze. His hands lifted, fingers splayed. Maya moved to the terminal, her eyes adjusted to the brightness of the screens. Numbers, account codes, transfer protocols, all scrolling in parallel columns, and in the corner of the primary display, a progress bar. "Transfer in progress, 47% complete." "They're doing it right now," she whispered. "We're in the middle of it." Cole's voice went flat. He grabbed the man by the collar and pulled him upright. "Who are you?" I'm just a contractor." The man's voice was thin, terrified. "I was hired to run the transfer. I don't know anything about—" "You know exactly what this is." Cole's voice was ice. "Where is Ashford? Where is Claudia?" "I don't." Cole pressed him harder against the wall. "Last chance. The man's resistance crumbled. Third floor. They're upstairs. Please, I'm just doing a job. I didn't know what it was going to. Cole looked at Maya. Can you stop the transfer? She was already sliding into the seat, her hands moving across the keyboard. She'd dropped out of Columbia Law after 2 semesters, but before law school, she'd done 2 years of computer science at NYU. It felt like a lifetime ago. But code was code, and the fundamentals didn't rot. Maybe she said, "Give me a minute. If I do this wrong, I might trigger an alert. Do it anyway." "We don't have a minute." Her fingers moved. The architecture was dense, layered security protocols, deliberately obfuscated routing, but it was also sloppy, the kind of code written by someone optimizing for speed rather than elegance. She found the transfer thread, isolated it, started tracing it back. There, she breathed. It's routing through a shell in the Caymans, then bouncing to... She stopped. Cole's voice was sharp. There are 12 accounts in this transfer, not just yours. She could see the account identifiers now. 12 distinct sources, 12 different financial institutions, 12 different targets. They're draining multiple sources simultaneously. Using tonight as cover for Victor's settling scores, Cole said grimly. Every rival he's been fighting for years. One night, one operation. Maya found the kill command, buried under 3 layers of encryption. She cracked the first layer, started on the second. The door exploded inward. She screamed and threw herself sideways as gunfire tore through the room. The contractor collapsed. She didn't look, couldn't look. Cole returned fire, precise and controlled, driving the first attacker back through the doorway, but there were more behind him, and the sound was enormous in the enclosed space, and Maya was back at the terminal, hands shaking so badly she could barely hit the keys. But she was at the second encryption layer. She was through it. She was at the third. Lena the transfer, Cole shouted, and the name was wrong, but the urgency was right, and she was already there, her fingers flying, a bullet punching through the monitor, 8 inches from her face, glass spraying across her cheek in bright, thin cuts, and she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. One more line, one more input. She hit enter. The screens went black. Transfer aborted. Got it. She gasped. I got it. Move. Cole grabbed her arm and hauled her toward the back of the room, where a second door she hadn't noticed led to an adjacent corridor. They burst through it and ran. Behind them, the room filled with shouting boots hammering on the old floor, the sounds of men coordinating in the darkness. Ahead of them, the corridor ran to a stairwell. Cole hit the door, and they plunged upward 3rd floor where the contractor had told them Ashford and Claudia were, and Maya's lungs burned with the climb, but she pushed through it, and then Cole stopped at the top and she ran into his back, and he was rigid with something she couldn't name. She looked past him. At the end of a corridor lined with grimy windows overlooking the factory floor below, light spilled from an open office. Standing inside it, a glass of amber liquid in one hand, and the absolute composure of someone who had never once in his life been surprised by anything, was a man Maya had never seen in person, but recognized instantly from the photograph Cole had shown her in the SUV. Victor Ashford. Silver temples, sharp jaw, the expensive ease of a man who had worn power so long it had become his natural posture. And beside him, her face a mask of sculpted stillness, her champagne gown catching the lamplight as she turned, was Claudia Wren. She looked at Cole for a long moment. Something moved across her face, something that might have been regret or might have been a performance of regret, and in that moment, Maya couldn't tell the difference. "Hello, Cole," she said softly. "I'm afraid the engagement is off." Cole's gun didn't waver, but Maya saw his hand tighten on the grip, saw the white appear in his knuckles. The silence that filled the room was the kind that comes after something irreversible has happened, and everyone present knows it, and nobody is ready to say so yet. Victor Ashford took a sip of his whiskey and smiled. "That's far enough, Mr. Harrington," he said. "I think we need to talk." Victor Ashford's smile was the kind of smile that had never once meant warmth. It was a weapon precise control deployed with the same deliberate calculation as everything else about him. He gestured toward the 2 chairs in front of the mahogany desk, as if he were inviting them to a quarterly review. "Far enough," he said again. "Both of you." Cole didn't move. His gun held steady, aimed at the center of Ashford's chest, and his voice was absolutely flat. "From where I'm standing, you just attempted to murder me, attempted to rob me, and coordinated an armed assault on a restaurant full of civilians. I'm having difficulty identifying the downside of pulling this trigger." Ashford raised his whiskey glass in a small, elegant toast. The downside is the 12 armed men currently stationed throughout this building and on its perimeter. The downside is that killing me gains you nothing. The operation doesn't stop, the transfer isn't the point, and you'll spend whatever remains of your life unable to prove any of this happened. He smiled again. The downside, Harrington, is that I've already won. You just don't know it yet. The transfer is aborted, Cole said. Your operation just collapsed. Ashford tilted his head. Did it? Maya was watching Claudia. Claudia stood slightly apart from Ashford, close enough to suggest alliance, but not so close as to suggest intimacy, the body language of someone who had positioned herself carefully for every outcome. Her face was doing something complicated that Maya couldn't entirely read. There was performance in it, certainly, but underneath the performance, something else, something raw and carefully suppressed. The transfer Ashford continued, setting his glass down on the desk with a small, precise click, was always a distraction. I've been doing this long enough to know that a single-vector approach is a beginner's strategy. He looked at Cole with something that was almost admiration. You're a smart man. You've built something impressive. I wouldn't have gone to this kind of trouble for a mediocrity. He paused. But you're also a man who was so blinded by sentiment that he sat across from his fiancée at his own engagement party and never saw the weapon she'd become. He let that land. That tells me something about your limits. Cole said nothing. But Maya could see at the thing in his face that wasn't rage and wasn't grief, but was both of them compressed into a cold, hard point. Claudia spoke. Her voice was very quiet. The merger, Cole. The Kellerman deal. That's what this was always about. The merger closes in 46 hours, Cole said. Does it? Claudia's expression shifted to something that looked painfully, genuinely sad. Think about what's going to be in every newspaper in the country by dawn. Tech billionaire loses his mind at his own engagement party. Paranoid episode. Violent altercation. Fled the scene. Currently at large after evading police. The Kellerman board has a morality clause in the acquisition agreement. It's standard in deals of this size. One credible accusation of instability, and they invoke it. Walk away. She paused. And when they do, Victor will be waiting. Maya felt the floor shift beneath her. She understood it now, the whole architecture of the night, which was not what it had appeared to be. The restaurant attack, the gunmen. The chaos, none of it was the primary operation. It was theater, stage dressing for a narrative. You're framing him, Maya said. Ashford turned to look at her for the first time since they'd entered the room. His eyes were the cold, assessing eyes of a man who evaluated everything for its utility. Ah, the waitress. He almost sounded impressed. Very good, Miss Reeves, Maya said. And I heard every word of the plan in that corridor at Criterion, including the part where Claudia told you no witnesses. Something flickered in Claudia's expression. Brief. Gone immediately. Miss Reeves Ashford said pleasantly, No one is going to believe a waitress with a history of financial instability, 2 years of incomplete law school, and a motive to fabricate a story for financial gain. He glanced at Cole. By morning, the story is Harrington's breakdown. The paranoid accusations against his innocent fiancée. The violent episode. The flight from police. Kellerman invokes their clause, I file a counter-acquisition offer by end of day. He spread his hands. By Tuesday, Kellerman Industries belongs to Ashford Partners, and you become a cautionary tale. It was elegant, Maya thought, genuinely elegant in its ugliness. They hadn't needed to kill Cole. They hadn't even needed to successfully steal the money. Though the 12 simultaneous transfers would have been a useful bonus. All they'd needed was to create a single night of documented chaos, attach Cole's name to it, and let the business world do the rest. Reputations were more fragile than bodies. They took longer to die and never came entirely back. I have a witness, Cole said. His voice was very quiet, who Ashford's tone was gentle with condescension. A traumatized waitress who stumbled into a situation she didn't understand. Darling, he turned to Claudia. Your assessment of her credibility. Claudia looked at Maya.